Welcome to Nightmares on Film's review of The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. In this third part of a series of 4, we'll look at the film's theatrical release and critical reception, as well as its legacy through time. We'll drop some timestamps in the description so you can jump straight to the part you're interested in. At Nightmares on Film, we explore the history of scary cinema, looking at classic films to see how they were made, why they're interesting or important, and most of all, how scary they are. If you haven't seen the film before, don't worry, we'll try not to mention any big spoilers. Check out our website at www.nightmaresonfilm.com for lots more reviews and other surprises too. As The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari neared completion, a strong marketing campaign tried to drum up interest in the film. The catchphrase, "You must become Caligari," appeared on posters and newspaper advertisements in Berlin. However, these did not mention that they were film advertisements, and as a result, most people who saw them had no idea what the phrase signified. The film premiered on February 26, 1920 at the Marmorhaus Theater in Berlin. Reports differ as to the results. Some claim that the reception was dreadful as a result of the cryptic marketing campaign. This caused the film to disappear from theaters after just a few shows while producer Dracula Film worked up a new marketing strategy. According to this narrative, after the new advertising had a few months to generate buzz, the film reopened to a much more positive reception. The conflicting report claims that the above is a fabrication, and, in reality, the film met with wild success upon release, causing screams and fainting among audience members and playing for a month straight, an unusually long time in those days. What we know for certain is that the film was successful enough to warrant an international release. The most important foreign market was the United States, where the upstart German filmmakers hoped to compete against more established Hollywood studios. The American premiere occurred in New York City at the Capitol Theater on April 3, 1921. Again, it's difficult to determine the results, with several conflicting reports and a lack of reliable box office numbers in those early years. The film seems to have played well in large cities and among more sophisticated audiences, while more rural and conservative areas were more resistant to its avant-garde stylings. The film also had to fight a current of ill will towards Germany in the minds of many American citizens caused by memories of the First World War. It's not uncommon for foreign films to face a certain amount of resistance, and The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari experienced more than most. Another country that had bitterness towards Germany was their great enemy in the First World War, France. The French were initially resistant to the film being shown in their country, but eventually had a change of heart. After a slow start, The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari developed a cult following. One Paris theater continued showing the film for 7 consecutive years, a record in France that stood for many decades. In addition to the US and France, the film was also seen by audiences in the UK, Belgium, the Netherlands, Sweden, Italy, Austria, and even as far as Turkey, India, China, Japan, and South America. By all accounts, most audiences and critics had a favorable opinion of the film. The artistic merit of the film was obvious. American critic Albert Lewin called it the only serious picture exhibited in America so far that in anything like the same degree has the authentic thrills and shock of art. Critics praised the direction, cinematography, pacing, set design, and art style. One American reviewer even commented that compared to The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, Hollywood films of the time seemed as though they were created by a group of defective adults at the 9-year-old level. Not all of the reaction was positive, however. In America, some critics saw it as a foreign invasion and an attack upon Hollywood. Some in Germany considered it too highbrow to become popular. Others felt it didn't depart far enough from the structure of a traditional theatrical performance. As with a play, it is divided into clearly defined acts. Notable culture vultures of the time Herbert Ihering, Blaise Cendrars, and Helmut Gross felt it made a mockery of the expressionist art style. French filmmaker John Epstein said it was a prize example of the abuse of décor in the cinema, and Jean Cocteau felt it was the first step towards a grave error which consists of flat photography of eccentric décors instead of obtaining surprise by means of the camera. Russian filmmaker Sergei Eisenstein called it a combination of silent hysteria, partially colored canvases, daubed flats, painted faces, and the unnatural broken gestures and action of monstrous chimeras. He surely intended this to be derogatory, but it can be taken as pretty high praise for a horror film. Perhaps the most acidic remark thrown at the cabinet of Dr. Caligari came from French critic Frédéric Philippe Amiguet, who commented, "It has the odor of tainted food. It leaves a taste of cinders in the mouth." The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari was a strong assault to the sensibilities of audiences and critics when originally released. However, in subsequent years, it has aged to near perfection and is now considered a major landmark in cinematic history. It's certainly one of the earliest examples of a proper horror film, one which has the primary goal of scaring the audience. Its depiction of mental illness set the bar for all films to follow. It also demonstrated that the motion picture could be more than just base entertainment. It could be a medium of artistic expression no less sophisticated than more established arts like painting, sculpture, or music. Caligari is one of the earliest examples of a cult film, one which generates an unusual following among fans who spread knowledge of it widely through word of mouth and carry its legacy through the generations. Among the many best-of lists that this film has graced over the years, Paste magazine has it at number 34 on their list of the 100 best horror movies of all time. Parade has it at number 15 on their list of the 151 best horror movies of all time, and Collider ranks it among the top 75 best horror movies of all time. It made the list of the 1001 Movies to See Before You Die, edited by Steven Schneider, as recently as the 2020 edition. On Rotten Tomatoes, it has a critic score of 99% based on 68 reviews, with an audience score of 89% based on over 25,000 ratings. They don't get much better than that. Almost immediately after its release, the impact of The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari began to ripple through the film world. A handful of other expressly expressionistic German films did follow in the early 20s, but none were nearly as influential as this one. Though not directly expressionistic, F. W. Murnau's 1922 masterpiece, Nosferatu, made similar use of light and shadows and evocative settings. This director's 1924 film, The Last Laugh, also took inspiration, as well as G. W. Pabst's psychoanalytic thriller Secrets of a Soul, 1926, and Fritz Lang's Metropolis, 1927, and M, 1931. Caligari also encouraged German filmmakers to follow suit by shooting their pictures predominantly on studio sets rather than locations, as was common previously. The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari put German cinema on the map for all the world to notice. In the US, it influenced Hollywood pictures like The Bells, 1926, and The Man Who Laughs. Universal really liked what they saw in Caligari. The studio's legendary monster movies of the 1930s show a strong influence. In Dracula, 1931, the title character has the ability to control the minds of his victims in a similar way to Dr. Caligari, and sleeps during the day in a wooden box, just like Cesare, and like Count Orlok in Nosferatu. The Mummy, 1932, also features mind control elements. The set design on Frankenstein, 1931, looks like it was left over from Caligari, particularly the laboratory, which features strange, off-kilter architecture as well as high contrast between light and shadows. The monster in this film is dressed all in black with a ghoulish pale face, and moves about in an unnatural, somewhat robotic fashion, just like Cesare. There's also a scene where the monster breaks into a house and harasses Elizabeth, which is almost identical to the abduction scene in Caligari. Sequels The Bride of Frankenstein, 1935, and Son of Frankenstein, 1939, also took inspiration. The Murders in the Rue Morgue, 1932, features a carnival setting with a sinister sideshow barker who mind controls an innocent into murder, as well as a similar abduction scene where the assailant escapes with his victim across twisted, surreal city rooftops reminiscent of the cityscapes in Caligari. After 1933, the filmmaking industries of many countries, particularly the US, were swelled by ranks of veteran German cast and crew fleeing their home country after the Nazis came to power. They brought with them sensibilities rooted in classics like The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, that would leave an indelible stamp on the cinematic landscape of their destination countries. In the US, the expressionist influence matured into the film noir of the 40s and 50s. In Sweden, Ingmar Bergman distilled the essence of the German classics and used it as an ingredient in his own groundbreaking films. The influence has persisted all the way to more modern times, as evident in the films of Tim Burton. Take, for example, the surreal afterlife world in Beetlejuice, 1988, or the appearance of the title character in Edward Scissorhands, 1990, who is strongly reminiscent of Cesare. Director Robert Veen never succeeded in recapturing the success he found on The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. He did acquire the rights to the film in 1934 with the intention of producing a remake, this time with sound, and replacing the expressionist style with a surrealist one. However, this plan failed to materialize before his untimely death in 1938. Many critics declared him a one-hit wonder since his only success was Caligari. But what a success it was! Veen's direction was efficient and effective, and who knows if the film would have been as successful under a different director's watch. In 1944, producer Erich Pommer and writer Hans Janowitz competed to try and obtain the rights to The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, both hoping to offer the film to Hollywood for an American remake. With the war still raging, the legality of German copyright law was in question, and the situation was left in limbo. In 1945, Janowitz attempted to get the services of legendary director Fritz Lang for a remake, but that plan, too, failed to come together. Not having much luck with remakes, Janowitz tried to sell the idea of a sequel to Hollywood, but Hollywood wasn't buying. At this point, Janowitz seems to have taken his ball and gone home. Caligari mania wasn't done yet, however. In 1947, a joint German-American team tried to remake the film with the Doctor reimagined as a former Nazi, but this project fizzled out too. Finally, in 1962, an independent producer working in Hollywood named Robert Lippert succeeded in acquiring the rights and titled his film The Cabinet of Caligari. Even the screenwriting talents of Robert Bloch, who had written the novel Psycho, upon which the Hitchcock film was based, was not enough to save this one. In addition to just not being very good, the plot had very little in common with the 1920 film. Talk about a money grab! An erotic thriller called Dr. Caligari, which was sort of a sequel to the 1920 film, came in 1989, but certainly did not approach the artistic merits of the original. Another variation emerged in the form of The Cabinet of Dr. Ramirez, 1991, but yet again, it wasn't anything special. It skipped the theaters and went straight to home video. In 2005, a remake also titled The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari used footage of modern actors superimposed against the backdrops from the 1920 film. This was technically impressive, and had the distinction of being the most faithful remake to date, but it still wasn't great. One critic called it the movie equivalent of bad fan fiction. Perhaps someday we'll get a worthy sequel or remake, but the way things are going, we might have to wait another century. The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari has been made into an opera at least twice. The first was composed by John Moran and performed by the American Repertory Theatre in Cambridge, Massachusetts in 1997. The second was composed by Karen McIver and performed by the Scottish Opera in Glasgow, Scotland in 2016. Audio adaptations of the story have been produced by Tangled Web Audio in 1998 and BBC Radio 3 in 2008. Caligari even inspired a Rob Zombie music video for the song Living Dead Girl, 1999. Speaking of music, there's a Spanish rock band called Gabinete Caligari, and a Japanese one named Caligari, and several songs by various musicians use the name Caligari or some variation thereof. Countless other movies, TV shows, books, and other aspects of popular culture reference or draw inspiration from this film. But wait, there's more. Click the link on your screen to be taken to the fourth and final part of this series, where we'll conclude our discussion of the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari with a deeper analysis of the film's meaning. After that, we'll answer that most important of questions. How scary is it? Thanks for watching. You can help us celebrate scary cinema by liking and commenting on the video. If you like what you see so far, why not subscribe to the channel and tap the bell icon so you'll get notified whenever we release a new video. On our website, www.nightmaresonfilm.com, you'll find written versions of all our film reviews, including many not yet available on our YouTube channel. If you poke around in there, you may discover some other surprises too.